It is the worst winter anyone can remember. The animals are gone, the snow will not stop, and the children are starting to die. The strongest hunters in the tribe, the fastest, the bravest, have no idea what to do. They have never seen a winter like this. But one person has. The oldest woman in the group. Her body is failing. She can barely walk. By every rule of survival, she is a burden, and she is about to save every life around that fire, because she remembers something. Something that happened 60 years ago. This is the secret that built the human race. Because at one specific moment in prehistory, early humans did something no creature on Earth had ever done before. They started keeping their old people alive on purpose. And that single decision did not just change our families, it built civilization. It is the reason you can read, the reason you can speak, the reason your species conquered the entire planet. So what did these ancient grandparents actually know that was worth feeding them for decades? The answer is going to change the way you think about your own family forever. Let's start with a fact that should not make sense. Almost every animal on Earth dies shortly after it stops reproducing. A salmon swims upstream, lays its eggs, and dies within days. A male octopus mates once and starves itself to death. In evolutionary biology, the logic is brutal and simple. Once you cannot pass on your genes, nature has no use for you. Your body is allowed to fall apart. This is the rule for nearly every species that has ever lived. But humans. Humans are the great exception. A human woman can live for 30, 40, even 50 years after she can no longer have children. That is not a small detail. That is a biological scandal. Because evolution does not waste resources. Evolution does not build a body that keeps running for decades with no reproductive purpose. Unless that purpose is something we have not figured out yet. And for a long time, scientists could not figure it out. Why would prehistoric humans, fighting for every single calorie, keep feeding people who could not have babies? It made no sense. Until a researcher walked into the African bush and watched a group of grandmothers do something that rewrote the entire story of human evolution. In the 1980s, anthropologist Kristen Hawkes was studying the Hadza, a group of hunter-gatherers in Tanzania, one of the last peoples on Earth still living close to the way our ancient humans did. And she expected the hunters to be the heroes, the strong young men bringing home meat. That is the story we all believe about cavemen, the mighty hunter feeding the tribe. But the data said something shocking. The hunters mostly failed. A skilled Hadza hunter comes home empty-handed most days. Big game is rare. So who was actually keeping everyone fed? Who was the most reliable provider in the entire group? It was the grandmothers, the old women, the ones nobody expected. They were out in the bush for hours every single day, digging deep into the rock-hard ground for tubers, roots buried so deep that children could not reach them, roots that required strength, patience, and decades of knowledge to find. The young mothers could not do it. They were busy nursing newborns. But the grandmothers fed everyone. And what Hawkes discovered next did not just explain one tribe, it explained why our entire species survived when others went extinct. Here is the breakthrough, the moment everything changes. When a grandmother feeds her grandchildren, she does something no other animal can do. She frees her own daughter. A young mother who has to find all her own food can only raise one child at a time. She has to wait years between babies. But give that mother a grandmother, and suddenly she can have her next child sooner, and the next, and the next. The grandmother becomes a second pair of hands, a second source of food, a second source of love. And the family does not just survive, it multiplies. This is called the grandmother hypothesis, and it suggests something beautiful and almost unbelievable. That the reason humans spread across the entire Earth, the reason there are 8 billion of us, is not our weapons, not our claws, not even our survival instinct. It is our grandmothers. The old women that nature said were useless turned out to be the engine of our entire species. And if that just gave you chills, if you are realizing right now that you are alive because some woman 50,000 years ago refused to stop caring, then do me one favor. Tap that subscribe button right now, because this channel is for people who want to understand where we really came from. The real human origins, not the cartoon version. You belong here. Now stay with me, because the grandmothers were only half the story. Because there was a second kind of survival, and it had nothing to do with food. Imagine a world with no books, no internet, no writing of any kind. This was the reality for nearly all of prehistoric life, for hundreds of thousands of years. Now ask yourself a terrifying question. Where did knowledge live? If you cannot write it down, the answer is chilling. Knowledge lived inside human heads. That was the only library that existed. The only database in the entire world was the human brain of someone who had lived a long time. And here is what that means. When an old person died in the Ice Age, it was not just a death, it was a library burning to the ground. Every drought they had survived, every plant they had learned to trust, every trick for Ice Age survival, gone in a single breath. So a tribe with grandparents had a massive advantage over a tribe without them, because the grandparents remembered things that only happen once in a lifetime, things that, when they happen, decide whether you live or die. And I am about to tell you the exact scenario where one old person's memory saved an entire bloodline from extinction. Picture this. You are a young Homo sapiens. You live in a green valley full of food and water. Life is good. You have never known hunger. Then one year, the rain does not come. The river shrinks. The plants wither. The animals leave. This is the moment that kills tribes. This is how groups vanish from Earth history without a trace. Because the young people panic. They have never seen this before. They do not know what to do. But there is one person in the group who is calm. The oldest member, the grandmother, and she remembers. She remembers that when she was a little girl, this exact thing happened. And her own grandmother led the tribe to a hidden spring, 2 valleys over. A spring that only matters once every 40 years. A spring that no young person even knows exists. She stands up, she points, and she leads them to water. That is how ancient humans survived. Not with muscle, with memory. The kind of memory that takes 60 years to build. And this answers one of the biggest questions in ancient history. What did ancient humans do all day? A huge part of the answer was listening to the old ones. Because the old ones held the map to staying alive. Now here is where it gets even more incredible. Scientists found a way to prove this actually happened. They figured out how to count the grandparents of the past. It sounds impossible, but they did it with teeth. A researcher named Rachel Kaspari studied hundreds of fossil teeth from ancient human remains. Teeth wear down in a predictable way as you age, so by measuring the wear, you can tell roughly how old someone was when they died, and then you can count. How many young adults versus how many old ones? She did this across hundreds of thousands of years of human history, and she found something stunning. For most of prehistory, old people were extremely rare. A caveman who reached grandparent age was almost a miracle. Most prehistoric humans died young. But then, around 30,000 years ago, something exploded. The number of people surviving to old age suddenly skyrocketed. For the first time ever, grandparents became common. And the timing of this lines up with one of the most important moments in the entire evolution of humans. A moment we still see the proof of today, in caves all over the world. Because at the exact same time grandparents became common, humanity woke up. Archaeologists call this period the Great Leap Forward. Suddenly, out of nowhere, we see cave paintings, real art, animals drawn on stone walls so beautiful they look modern. We see jewelry, beads carved from bone and shell. We see complex tools, needles, fishhooks, weapons made of multiple parts. We see the first signs of religion, of burial, of meaning. After hundreds of thousands of years of almost nothing changing, early humans suddenly became us. And it is almost certainly not a coincidence that this explosion happened the moment grandparents stuck around. Think about it. A young person can learn to make a tool, but it takes an elder to teach the young person, to then teach the children. Knowledge could finally stack, generation on generation, like bricks building a tower. For the first time, human ancestors were not starting from zero every single lifetime. They were building. And that tower eventually became everything you see around you. But this raises a dark and uncomfortable question. If grandparents were this powerful, what happened to the humans who did not have them? This brings us to the Neanderthals. For a long time, we imagined them as stupid brutes, dumb cavemen with clubs. That picture is completely wrong. Neanderthals were intelligent. They had bigger brains than us. They made tools. They controlled fire. They cared for their sick. They survived the brutal cold of the European Ice Age for hundreds of thousands of years. These were not failures. So why are they gone? Why did the Neanderthal vanish into extinction? While Homo sapiens spread across the world, there are many theories, but here is one that is haunting. When Kaspari looked at her tooth data, she found that Neanderthals had far fewer old individuals than the modern humans who replaced them. Fewer grandparents, fewer living libraries, fewer keepers of the rare, life-saving knowledge. Maybe the Neanderthals were just as smart as us, but their knowledge kept dying with them, while ours kept getting passed down. In the end, the species that remembered beat the species that forgot. And the Neanderthals were not the only lost cousins. There was another group, a ghost lineage we barely even knew existed, until a single finger bone changed everything. In a cave in Siberia, scientists found a tiny piece of a finger bone. It did not belong to a human like us. It did not belong to a Neanderthal. It belonged to a completely unknown kind of hominid. We now call them the Denisovans, an entire branch of human ancestors that we had no idea existed until that one fragment. And here is the wild part. The Denisovans are not fully gone because long ago our ancestors met them and had children with them. If you have certain DNA today, you are part Denisovan. You carry the genes of a lost people whose knowledge, whose stories, whose grandparents have been completely erased from memory. This is the brutal truth of Earth history. We are the last branch standing of a family tree that was once crowded with different kinds of people. Homo habilis, Neanderthals, Denisovans, so many lost cousins. And the thing that may have separated the survivors from the lost was something so simple it sounds like a joke. It was whether or not you took care of your old people. But humans are not the only species that figured this out. There is one other animal that discovered the power of grandmothers, and it lives in the ocean. Killer whales, orcas. They are one of the only other species on Earth where the females live for decades after they stop having babies, just like human grandmothers. And scientists wanted to know why. So they watched orcapods for years, and what they found was almost identical to the human story. In times of famine, when the salmon disappeared, the pods that survived were the ones led by an old grandmother, the matriarch, because she remembered. She remembered where the fish go in a bad year. She remembered the secret feeding grounds. The young whales did not know, but she did, and she led them there. The pods that lost their grandmother were far more likely to have young whales die. This is not a story about humans. This is a deep law of nature. When survival depends on rare knowledge, the old become priceless. The grandmother becomes the most valuable member of the entire group. And this completely flips the story we tell about strength. We think survival belongs to the young and the powerful. But again and again, in the ocean and on land, it was the old and the wise who saved everyone. Now let me show you what this looked like. On the coldest, deadliest nights of the Ice Age, let's answer one of the most searched questions in ancient history. How did ancient humans survive winter? Picture the Ice Age humans, surrounded by snow, the temperature far below freezing, no food growing anywhere. The young, strong hunters are important, yes, but strength alone does not beat winter. Knowledge beats winter. And who holds the knowledge? The grandparents. The old man knows exactly how to build the fire so it lasts till dawn. He has done it 10,000 times. The old woman knows which furs to layer, how to seal a shelter against the wind, how to ration food so it lasts the dark months. She knows which berries from last autumn are still safe, and which ones will kill a child by morning. This is survival skills built over a lifetime. This is the difference between a tribe that wakes up in spring and a tribe that does not wake up at all. For prehistoric survival, the grandparents were not extra. They were essential. They were the operating system the whole tribe ran on. And the moment you understand this, you start to see your own grandparents completely differently. Because the instinct that made them precious back then is still inside you right now. And modern science is finding it in the strangest places. There is a feeling almost every human has, the pull to protect the old, the instinct to listen when an elder speaks, the comfort of a grandparent's voice. We treat this like simple sweetness, like a nice family feeling. But it is not just sweetness. It is biology. It is a survival instinct burned into your DNA over hundreds of thousands of years. The tribes that loved their elders survived. The tribes that abandoned them often did not. So the love we feel for grandparents is itself a survival tool. Evolution did not just keep the old alive by accident. It made us want to keep them alive. It wired affection into us so that we would protect the very people who protected us. Read that again. The reason you love your grandmother might literally be because the humans who did not went extinct. This is one of the most beautiful ideas in all of evolutionary biology, that love and survival are the same thing, that caring for the weak is what made us strong. And it gets even deeper, because grandparents did not just keep us alive. They gave us the one thing that makes us truly human. They gave us stories. Think about a night 50,000 years ago. The fire crackling, the children gathered close, and the oldest member of the tribe begins to speak. She tells them about the great flood her grandmother survived, about the giant animals that once roamed the land, about where the tribe came from, about what happens when you die. This is the birth of human history itself. Before there were any history books, there were grandparents around a fire. And those stories were not just entertainment. They were instruction manuals for staying alive. Hidden inside a tale about a monster in the river was a real warning. Do not swim there. The current will kill you. Hidden inside a legend about an angry mountain was a memory of a real volcanic eruption. The stories carried the lessons of how ancient humans survived, wrapped in a form that children would actually remember. This is why every culture on Earth has elders telling tales. It is one of the deepest patterns in all of human history. The old transmit the past, so the young can have a future. And every ancient history documentary you have ever watched is really just a continuation of that fire. But now I have to show you the dark side of all this, because there was a terrible danger hidden inside this system. Here was the great weakness of early humans. If your entire library is a person, then your entire library can die, suddenly, in an accident, in a sickness, in a single bad night. Imagine a tribe whose oldest member is the only one who knows where the safe water is, which mushrooms heal and which ones kill, how to set a broken bone. Now imagine that person dies before they finish teaching. In one moment, centuries of knowledge vanish. This actually happened over and over throughout prehistory. Entire groups of ancient humans likely went extinct, not from war, not from predators, but from forgetting, from losing their elders too soon. This is why passing down knowledge became the most important job in any tribe. More important than hunting, more important than fighting, because muscle could be replaced, but a mind that held 60 years of survival skills could not. So the smartest tribes did something clever. They did not rely on just one elder. They made sure the knowledge spread. They turned memory into a system. And that system is the ancestor of everything we call education today. Think about what a school really is. It is old people passing knowledge to young people, so the young do not have to learn everything by dying. That is it. That is the whole invention. And it started in the Ice Age, around a fire. Every classroom on Earth today is just a more organized version of a grandparent teaching a child which plant not to eat. The reason your species dominates this planet is not that any one of us is so smart. A single human alone in the wild is a weak, slow, clawless animal. You would not last a week. Our power was never individual. It was collective. It was the ability to stack knowledge across generations, to stand on the shoulders of every human who came before. And the grandparents were the bridge. They connected the dead to the living, the past to the future. Without that bridge, every generation falls back into the dark. With it, we climbed all the way to the stars. But before we talk about today, I have to kill a myth you have believed your entire life. You have probably heard it 100 times. That ancient humans all died at 30. That nobody lived past 40. that old age basically did not exist. It is one of the biggest myths in all of prehistory, and it is completely false. The thing that fools everyone is one number: average lifespan. And yes, in prehistoric life, that average was brutally low, around 30, sometimes even less. But that number is a trap. It does not mean people dropped dead at 30. It means babies died. So many of them. Infant death was everywhere in prehistoric survival. And all those tiny deaths dragged the average way, way down. But here is the truth they hide. If you survived childhood, if you made it past those deadly early years, you could live into your 60s, your 70s, sometimes beyond. Old people were rarer than they are today, but they absolutely existed. Every tribe of ancient humans had a few: the wise ones, the survivors, the keepers of the knowledge. So the next time someone tells you the cavemen all died young, you can tell them the truth. The grandparents were there, and without them, none of us would be here. But living a long life created a strange new problem, a problem so big that only grandparents could solve it. Here is the problem. The human baby is a disaster. Compared to almost every other animal on Earth, a baby deer can stand and walk within an hour of birth. A baby horse runs the same day, but a human baby is helpless for years. It cannot walk. It cannot feed itself. It cannot survive alone for a single day. Why? The answer is the human brain. Our brains are enormous, so big that a baby has to be born early, before its head grows too large to be delivered. So we arrive unfinished, and we stay unfinished for over a decade. In the wild, that is terrifying. A child who needs 10 years of care is 10 years of danger, 10 years of an extra mouth to feed. No mother could carry that weight alone. The math simply does not work, unless she has help. And the perfect help was a grandmother, someone who was finished having her own babies, and could pour every bit of her energy into the grandchildren. So think about what this really means. Our giant brains, the single thing that makes us Homo sapiens, the thing behind every invention in human history, could only exist because grandparents existed to protect the long, slow childhood those brains require. No grandparents, no long childhood. No long childhood, no big brain. No big brain, no human evolution at all. No you. For 300,000 years, that deal held. And now, for the first time ever, we are quietly breaking it. For the first time in human history, we have replaced our grandparents with a glowing screen. Need to know something? You do not ask an elder anymore. You ask the internet. And in many ways, that is amazing. But something strange is happening to us. For 300,000 years, the old were the most valuable people in any group. They were treasured, honored, protected. Now, in the modern world, the old are often pushed aside, forgotten, treated as if their knowledge is out of date. We have flipped a law of nature that kept us alive since the dawn of human origins, and we did it in just a couple of generations. Maybe that is fine. Maybe the internet really is a better library. But there are things a search engine can never give you. The look in a grandparent's eyes when they tell you about their life. The feeling of belonging to something older than yourself. The wisdom that only comes from having survived. You cannot download that. It only lives in a person. And when that person is gone, it is gone for good. Which brings us all the way back to that nameless ancestor I told you about at the very start. Remember them. The old one. The grandmother who should have been dead by nature's rules, but who lived and dug roots from the frozen ground to feed a child, and remembered the hidden spring in the year of the great drought, and sat by the fire and told the stories that carried your bloodline through the dark. You are the proof that her knowledge worked. Every breath you take is the finish line of a relay race that has been running for hundreds of thousands of years. And the baton was passed by grandparents through the Ice Age, through famine, through the long, cold winters, through the extinction of the Neanderthals and the Denisovans, all the way down to you, watching this on a screen.
The deeper lesson is that human survival was never built by strength alone. Hunters could bring meat, young adults could travel farther, and children could adapt quickly, but none of those abilities mattered for long if every generation had to begin again. Elders gave communities continuity. They remembered where water remained during drought, which foods were safe when familiar plants disappeared, how to protect infants through winter, and how earlier mistakes had ended in disaster. That accumulated memory allowed knowledge to become culture. A lesson learned by one person could pass to children and then to grandchildren, growing more refined with every generation. Survival skills gradually became stories, customs, tools, and systems of teaching. Grandparents therefore represented more than additional help within a family. They connected experience with possibility, giving younger people access to years they had never personally lived. Modern technology can preserve more information than any ancient elder could, yet information and wisdom are not identical. A database can record what happened, but it cannot fully communicate how fear felt, why a decision mattered, or what a family endured to survive. The history of grandparents reminds us that progress depends not only on discovering something new, but also on protecting, examining, and passing forward what earlier generations learned.